What's going on, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with Dreamland today. We're on page 310. The chapter is called The Treatment is You. And we only got about two or three chapters after this, and then we're done with the book. So I hope you're enjoying it. The Treatment is You. Washington State. Out in Washington State, Jamie Mai and Gary Franklin continued chronicling the effects of what Franklin called the worst man-made epidemic in history made by organized medicine. Washington addicts in treatment for opiates had skyrocketed through the 2000s from about 600 to a conservatively estimated 8,600 by 2010. Most were young, suburban, and white. Overdose deaths in the state rose to 512 in 2008. In 2008, L&I issued its guidelines to doctors aimed to limit opiate prescribing. Overdose deaths had declined since then, and by 2012 they stood at 388. The numbers of injured workers dying from overdoses, which had so startled Jamie Mai years before when she was new to her job, had kept rising, up to 32 in 2009. But since the prescribing guidelines came out, the number had been cut in half. So too had the numbers of injured workers who ended up as chronic opiate users. I went up to Seattle, where the Multidisciplinary Pain Center traced its lineage back to John Bonica, the former pro wrestler and pain pioneer. Dr. David Taubin is now its director. Years ago, Taubin was an eager opiate prescriber. He taught the purported message of Porter and Jick. He cheered the introduction of higher dose OxyContin. Then he watched patients fail to improve. They became disgruntled, demanding ever higher doses. During these years, he remembered an applicant to the center's pain fellowship program who was asked why he wanted the post. "I want a Bentley," the applicant replied. "That to me is a metaphor for where pain management is," Taubin told me. Having changed his mind about opiates, Taubin came to work at the clinic when Alex Kahana took over. Kahana's new approach was to try and get back to the old approach, treat the social and psychological roots of pain along with the biological. The center staff now included 2 psychiatrists, 3 psychologists, a vocational counselor, as well as doctors in family, internal, and rehab medicine. A generation of doctors had been urged to consider pain the 5th vital sign. "It's just wrong," Taubin said. "I'd say 15% of my patients are probably much better off by being on opiates, but at a low or a moderate dose." Taubin took over for Kahana in 2013. Kahana's 5 years at the center immersed him in America's pain culture wars. The experience had made him something of a philosopher of pain and happiness. Kahana believed that what insurance companies reimbursed for distilled many unfortunate values in the country. "We overtest, perform surgery, stick needles. These people are worse off," he said. "If we work on their nutrition, diet, sleep habits, smoke habits, helping them find work, then they improve. You have to be accountable. If you give a treatment that kills people or makes people worse, you gotta stop. You can't continue making money on stuff like that doesn't work." Kahana saw stuff as the problem. Our reverence for technology blinded us to more holistic solutions. "We got to the moon, invented the internet. We can do anything. It's conceivable to think that there are problems that don't have a technological solution. To go from, 'I can do anything,' to 'I deserve everything' is very quick. All of a sudden, we can't go to college without Adderall. You can't do athletics without testosterone. You can't have intimacy without Viagra. We're all the time focused on the stuff and not the people. I tell pain patients, forget all that. The treatment is you. Take charge of your life and be healthy, and do what you love and love what you do." And he ignored that very advice. Kahana came to Seattle at 260 pounds and gained 45 more over the next 5 years as, stressed and overworked, he battled to rebuild the historic clinic. The clinic won numerous awards, was highlighted as a model. He was on CNN and in People magazine. He gave a TED Talk and testified before the U.S. Senate on overprescribing in medicine. He grew fatter all the while. He was taking medications for hypertension, cholesterol, and then more for the side effects of the medication. 9 pills a day, $1,500 a month in copays. "I couldn't walk 2 flights of stairs without huffing and puffing," he said. His own doctor was about to prescribe something for elevated blood sugar when Kahana had had enough. He seemed to be living like an addict. He had spent spent years trying to change public policy, influence academia, and shape legislation on the overprescribing of pills for pain, and now he decided to become the change. He resigned from the clinic. He is now a consultant to low-income communities on health issues. He went on a regimen of healthy eating and daily training of running, strength conditioning, and yoga. His pills became gradually unnecessary. He lost 110 pounds and runs marathons. The U.S. medical system is good at fighting disease, Kahana believes, and awful at leading people to wellness. They don't know how to do it, and the path they offer actually makes people worse. In 2013, the committee that John Rockefeller Jr. formed to search for the holy grail of a non-addictive painkiller turned 75. Its annual conference was at San Diego's Bayfront Hilton, under impossibly azure June skies. The seminars took place in darkened conference rooms. Speakers presented data and voices muted by thick carpets. I attended because I wanted to understand what had become of the search for the Holy Grail. The search for a non-addictive alternative to opiates had a fairly spotty historical record. It had produced drugs, many of which were once believed incorrectly to be non-addictive: Demerol, nalbuphine, Talwin. But this was the oft-repeated story as humankind sought heaven without hell. The companies that first manufactured heroin thought it was non-addictive and marketed it that way. 100 years later, so did the company that made OxyContin. Maybe this was just nature's way of saying that we can't have it all. The committee was now known as the College on Problems of Drug Dependence. It had expanded, and more CPDD researchers studied addiction treatment. At the conference, I had a beer with Andy Koop, the University of Maryland chemist, who was nice enough to take the time to explain his fascination with the morphine molecule and how it worked. Drugs that contained variations on the molecule were, quote, damned good at being painkillers, he said. We are working to find other drugs that are that good without the undesired effects. My call is it's not going to happen. We have been using morphine clinically for 100 years and will be using it 100 years from now. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I don't see how it's ever going to happen. Then, as if thinking out loud, he added, if we could only stop the euphoria, but not the analgesia, I think we would actually have what I would call the Holy Grail. Among the conference throngs was Martin Adler, a professor of pharmacology at Temple. Adler had been a member of the CPDD since the 1960s. Virtually all of us, and certainly me, believe the chances of finding the Holy Grail drug are slim to none, Adler told me. People keep looking, and industry keeps looking. I asked Adler if he thought such a drug was even desirable. Can humans handle having it at all? After all, Americans had it for a brief time, and many of the kids who benefited most from the country's embarrassment of riches had turned to drugs used to numb pain. Perhaps not, Adler allowed. Morphine was, he said, a great metaphor for life. The bad effects of morphine act to minimize the use of the drug, which is a good thing. There are people born without pain receptors. Living without pain is a horrible thing. They die young because pain is the greatest signaling mechanism we have. Adler believed the lesson of the last 15 years was that the conception of pain needed to change. I don't think you're going to find one treatment for pain, he said. You don't use one drug to treat all cancers. If you do, it's because you don't know how to treat each cancer specifically. I think where we're headed is to find the most effective treatments for different kinds of pain: chronic back pain, neuropathic pain. We just don't know enough about them. That may be because pain isn't a single disease. The body is incredible, he went on, the most amazing thing we can imagine. What you do is learn that there is nothing that's so isolated from everything else that you can just attack that. Everything is tied to everything else. When you're dealing with the brain, they all intersect. I called Nathaniel Katz, the pain specialist in Boston. In the years since his patient Peter's death and his encounter with Peter's sister, Katz had come to see the foibles of human nature at work in all of this. My instructors told me that when you take opioids for pain, you can't become addicted because pain absorbs the euphoria. That was at Harvard Medical School. It was all rubbish, and we all know. Why do we listen to those messages? Because we wanted them to be true. I told them I had spoken with people who pointed to Foley and Portnoy's '86 paper in the journal Pain, and then to Portnoy's finding from pharmaceutical companies, including Purdue Pharma, as he traveled the country urging doctors to adopt a new view and use of opiate painkillers. These critics saw the potential for a conflict of interest. That's my daughter.
Hey, Daddy.
I'm going to finish up this chapter later, guys. We only got...
in the dark, and the
Okay.
dark.
Talk to you guys later.
Eyes?